As a doctoral candidate in the UMass Amherst Transportation Engineering Department, Radhameris Gómez has been making great strides in the field of traffic engineering. In particular, she has been researching safety concerns involving at-grade, non-gated railroad crossings and the factors that go into creating safe and efficient crossings with minimal crashes. Along with Dr. Nodler and Dr. Fisher, Ms. Gómez has created a report detailing driver behavior at railroad crossings, taking into consideration various forms of distractions the driver may face. Ms. Gómez comes to UMass with an outstanding background in transportation engineering and human factors, having been named a Fulbright Scholar, an Eno Leadership Fellow, and a National Science Foundation Scholar, among several other high honors. Furthermore, Ms. Gómez holds a dual bachelor's in civil engineering and psychology from the Rensselaer Polytechnic Institute, as well as a master's in transportation engineering and human factors from UMass. Ms. Gómez's most recent research project has focused on grade crossings, railroad crossings in which the roadway and rail are on the same level or grade. Grade crossings fall under two classifications, passive and active. Passive crossings use simple signage, such as the crossbuck and advance warning by sign, to notify drivers of the possibility of an upcoming crossing. Active crossings, on the other hand, use flashing lights and other dynamic components triggered by an approaching train to notify drivers. Throughout the study, Ms. Gómez focused on whether the effectiveness of active crossings maintains its validity under certain conditions in which the driver is distracted, in particular by cellular device usage. To conduct her research, Ms. Gómez used a driving simulator and mobile eye tracker, as well as a rail package simulation developed by Real-Time Technologies. The eye tracker provides information about where a driver is looking at a given time and serves as a useful tool in determining the effectiveness of relevant traffic control devices. Using 72 participants in two distinct age groups, Ms. Gómez researched driver behavior in experiments where participants were performing a cell phone task or an in-vehicle task such as changing the radio, while also maintaining a control group. The participants navigated two drives in a virtual environment with 12 grade crossings, 4 of which were of particular interest. Throughout the experiment, Ms. Gómez and her colleagues focused on three main scenarios: lights flashing and a train beginning to cross, driver behavior with a large lead vehicle obstructing their view, and driving through a crossing in which the lights are off, there is no lead vehicle ahead, and no train crossing. Ms. Gómez is currently completing data collection and analysis of her findings.
So in 2008, I graduated college and the stock market crashed, and I had a job offer, and I couldn't, my job offer was rescinded. And so there was an opportunity at the City College of New York to do research in transportation urban planning. So I was able to take part of a team that was evaluating the potential for a multimodal facility on Long Island. And so when I was involved in this project, I realized how interesting the field of transportation was. And so that's when I decided that perhaps I should go to graduate school for it. I think railroad safety is an extremely important topic in the U.S., particularly because we're hopefully moving towards higher speed rail service in the U.S. And so there are some places, for example, like in Connecticut, where Acela, which is the service between Boston and DC, cannot operate at its full speed because there are grade crossings. And so given the fact that so many of these crossings are in a public thoroughfare, we need to find ways to improve them. We need to find ways to make them better so that we can perhaps increase our rail service, but most importantly, save lives. I think it's important to find out how is it that these traffic control devices are affecting the way people interact with crossings and how people navigate crossings. Because if we were to look back, this signage has been there for a very long time, and so we have really evolved as a society. We now have cell phones, we now have GPS devices, we now have audiobooks, and so it's very important to learn how to best improve them to keep road users safe. In fact, there are two things that really govern how drivers interact with a grade crossing. First, there is the Manual on Uniform Traffic Control Devices, or the MUTCD, which essentially is like the Bible of traffic engineering. And the MUTCD states that the minimum requirement at a grade crossing is a crossbuck, and a crossbuck is the X that has rail crossing spelled across, and the yellow sign, which we call the advanced warning sign. So it's the yellow sign with a black X on it. So this is minimum requirement under MUTCD standards. Now, every state has supplemental traffic control devices that come into play in certain instances. My understanding, and based on my knowledge, is that there are some laws. For example, in Massachusetts, every bus must make a complete stop at a grade crossing. And so depending on not only the traffic control devices at these crossings, but also the traffic control devices in the vicinity of a crossing, that can have an impact. So if there are some states, perhaps, I can't think of one that comes to mind specifically, but if there are some states where there is a minimum requirement between a grade crossing and a stop controlled intersection, I'm sure that would have an impact, right? Because depending on the geometry of an intersection, drivers can be placed at risk should a train approach and a driver may not be fully aware that a train is approaching, and that can perhaps cause some accidents. So NHTSA just released their numbers for 2016, and there was I believe a 7% increase in crashes. I believe that's right. You can double check me on that. But it was probably the largest increase I read, I think, in the last 4 years. That is really bad, right? We are a first class country. We are a fully developed nation. So what is it that is causing our roadways to still be a place where people are losing their lives? In my experience in Spain, as I've shared with you, I went there and had the opportunity to do research on a Fulbright grant. It's very different, right? And one of the things I noticed is road users' approach to safety is completely different, right? I studied a grade crossing that had a volume of 90 trains a day. Okay, 90 trains a day, 45 in each direction, and they had not had a crash in 30 years. And so it makes you wonder, right? It makes you think, why is it that in a place with, they had a pretty high vehicular traffic and a lot of pedestrian activity, what is it that makes the US be such a hotbed for crashes, right? So I personally believe that we can do much better. I think we have great safety professionals in this country. I think we have great technology. Perhaps we need to learn what is it that drivers are not understanding as it comes to their roadway infrastructure environment, or what is it that as engineers we can do to improve safety and make sure that we don't have 30,000 people dying on our national roadways every year. One, don't be distracted. I would say that's the most important piece of advice I can give them. And it's hard, right? Because sometimes you're thinking about having dinner and you don't think about that as a distraction, right? But be mindful that you're approaching a crossing. Even if it's a crossing that you're familiar with on a daily basis, right? You have to stop or slow down, and you have to look. Looking, it's very important. And looking is not just moving your head left and right. Looking is actually making a conscious decision to look at the different places at that crossing where a train may emerge, right? So if there is, a hidden, if there's some vegetation and you can't see really well, that means slowing down and creeping up to a point where you can actually take a glance down the tracks and ensure that a train is not crossing. If there's a vehicle in front of you and the vehicle is stopped, as opposed to continue after the vehicle has moved, you should also stop and look both ways. So it may sound really simple, but I think that these are things that as you become more of an experienced driver, we tend to forget. And I think it's very important to maintain as you go over crossings or just any intersection in general. Well, that's a really good question, right? Because sometimes we think that if you are using a hands-free device, like the Bluetooth on your vehicle or a headpiece, it doesn't impact you as much. Well, it does, right? Because this is what we call a cognitive distraction. So there are 3 types of distraction, right? So what we call cognitive, which is your mind is somewhere else other than the driving task. Manual distraction, which is when your hands are actually off the steering wheel doing something else. And visual distraction, which is when you're, perhaps looking at something inside your vehicle with your eyes. So you think you're paying attention because your hands are on the steering wheel, right? But you're looking around, you're perhaps looking at the passenger next to you, or maybe at that billboard that caught your attention on the side of the road, right? So cell phone distraction is huge. It's something that is detrimental. I don't have the statistics right now, but I can tell you that it's one of the leading causes of deaths amongst teenagers, right? And we blame teens a lot, but the reality is that this is something that carries on between age ranges. During my study, for example, I found that my cell phone drivers, so drivers who were replicating a cell phone conversation, they were looking much less than those drivers who were just a control group or simply just driving without performing a secondary task. So I would say that don't be fooled by the fact that your hands are on the steering wheel, your eyes are in the forward roadway. The reality is that distraction, particularly cognitive distraction, is detrimental to your driving performance, and it may cost you your life. So my immediate next step is to defend my dissertation and graduate. But my hope with this research, the reason why I was motivated to perform this research, is so that the results can have a bigger impact, right? So this research is being sponsored by the New England University Transportation Center, which is housed at MIT. And so given that these are federal funds, my hope is that with this newfound knowledge of alternative treatments that may help to enhance crossing safety, we can make some changes, perhaps beginning here in the state of Massachusetts and then more broadly. So my hope is that this research will have a bigger impact in terms of policy making for safety at grade crossings when no gates are present.